Now that we know how to make a folded bead, the next step is to jazz them up by giving them an interesting patterned surface effect using rubber stamps. Here's an example of a folded bead made with this surface technique that I will step you through now. You can leave the pattern raised, as in these examples, or you can flatten the pattern, as in these examples. In either case, the first step is to create a clay sheet that's been textured with a rubber stamp. If you choose to flatten the pattern, a rubber stamp that is shallow rather than deep is preferable for this technique. Please see my claying tips page on my website for instructions on how to use your pasta machine to get a quick and foolproof impression. I'm using my roundabout rubber stamp for this example. We start by taking the textured sheet done in black clay and cut out a section that's a bit bigger than what we'll need for the size of the bead we'd like to make. Think about the pattern you'd like to capture. I'd like to capture these jelly rolls, so I'm going to cut the sheet, keeping in mind I need to fold the sheet in half. To add color to the bead, I am using a combination of two products, both of them in a paste form, and give a metallic finish. The Viva Decor Inca Gold product line are water-based and Gilders paste are oil-based. For this technique, we only want to apply color on the raised level of the design, so the paste form makes this very easy. I'm going to use my fingers and apply a layer of German silver Gilders paste on the top level of my texture. Go over the surface several times to ensure good coverage. See how the pattern pops against the black background once the color is added. If you like just the single color, you can stop here. I often like to add multiple colors. All the following colors I will add one after the other with no drying time needed between each. I love these pastes because if I'm not happy with a color, I can just layer a new color over it. Next, I'm adding small touches of Foundry Bronze Gilders paste randomly over the sheet. And last, I'm adding touches of Inca Gold Copper. And here's the sheet with the three beautiful metallic colors applied, ready for the next step. At this point, you can proceed with part 1's instruction for making a folded bead if you'd like to keep the three-dimensional texture. If you'd like to flatten the pattern, let's keep going. I'm using a tool called a bone folder to burnish the pattern flat, but the edge of a credit card will work as well. Cover the textured sheet with a piece of paddy paper or parchment paper. Start with light pressure. You don't want to create a lumpy surface. I'm using small circular motions to go over the sheet and gradually flatten the pattern. Occasionally check the sheet to see how things are progressing. An alternate method you can use to flatten your pattern is to put your textured sheet through the pasta machine on progressively thinner settings until the pattern is flat. I prefer this manual burnishing method because it is easier to control and it results in less distortion of the pattern. And there is your flattened pattern. If you flattened your pattern using the pasta machine, you probably have a very thin sheet at this point. Back it with an additional sheet of black clay to give your bead an appropriate thickness, a total thickness of approximately 1.5 millimeters for a small bead and 2 millimeters thick for a larger bead or pendant. Burnish the two layers of clay together and make sure you have no air pockets between them. Retrim and neaten up your edges. Now you're ready to proceed with the instructions in part 1 of this video and form your folded bead. To cure your bead, place it face up on a piece of fleece fabric to prevent it from getting a flat spot on the back side. I inserted some small pieces of fleece into the open edges to maintain the nice rounded form during curing. You can also cure with rubber cord strung through the bead to ensure the edges stay open during curing. Bake at the clay manufacturer's recommended temperature for approximately 40 minutes and let it cool completely in the oven. Here is the bead after curing. Your cut edges will of course be black. You can leave them black, or at this point you can apply gilders paste, Inca Gold, or use a Krylon pen to color your edges. The last step is to apply a gloss to protect the surface pattern. You'll notice that the colors will have dulled during the curing process. The gloss will bring back that beautiful metallic shine and really make the color pop. Take some thin flexible wire and thread it through the bead and create a little hanger with it. Use a good quality soft artist brush to apply the gloss. I'm using a product called Varathane, but you can use any gloss that is polymer compatible. Because we are going to hang this bead to dry, it's important that you apply a thin coating so that it doesn't drip. The wire provides an easy, hands-free way to apply gloss to both sides of the bead at once. The Varathane goes on milky white but will dry clear. I apply at least 4 thin coats of Varathane to get a really good resin-like finish. It may look good after 1 coat, but I encourage you to keep going and give it at least 4. You'll really see the difference. Hang to dry. It looks like bead laundry day in this picture. Here's the finished bead. I've added a button as an additional decorative element. Let's start by getting some pattern ideas by looking at a few of my test sampler beads made using the techniques I've shown in this video. These are beads made using Pixie Art Stamp Designs Magic Mushroom, Frenzy, and Indian Summer. And here's some patterns from my Roundabout, Hurly-Burly, Conga Line, and Tempest stamps. These are examples of folded beads using other surface techniques. In the first 2 cases, I simply applied washes of various colors of metallic acrylic paints over white clay in the first example and green clay in the second. In the last example, I've applied my faux facet technique, to which instructions can be found in my shapes book. Let's take a look at individual finished pieces to give you some details on how they were made and give you some design ideas. For this pendant, I used the corner of a square cutter for the shape, applied a border, and embellished it with buttons and some rubber cording at the bottom. I was not very keen on this pendant until I added these elements, and they made all the difference in taking a ho-hum piece to another level. Think about those extra touches that can make a piece really unique and special. The texture is called Starburst by Pixie Art Stamps. I just love the color and texture of these red yarns for the cording. This is one of my favorite pieces from this project. I used my Mambo stamp for these 3 green beads cut asymmetrically using a pod-shaped cutter. I used the Viva Decor Inca Gold Emerald color on black clay and flattened the pattern. It took me a long time playing with many variations with the polymer and traditional beads before I came up with this configuration that I felt was balanced and interesting. If you're feeling frustrated because things are not feeling right with a piece, leave it for a day or 2 and revisit it. Sometimes the answer comes quickly after you look at it with fresh eyes. Keep trying until you're truly happy with it. The piece will be all the more special for all the effort you put into it. This shape of folded beads made with the pod-shaped cutter work really well in repetition, and here's a good example of that. The texture is from my After the Rain stamp, which with my color choice has an animal print feel. I used Gilders Paste German Silver for the inner strand and Foundry Bronze for the outer strand. The beads are cut asymmetrically with the wider end going in opposite directions in each strand to add some interest in how the strands work together. There is a really high gloss on these beads and they look very striking when worn. Even the earrings are small folded beads. Here is a very simple shape made using the pod cutter. Again, I think this is a great example where the additional design elements really help add interest. I used my Watusi stamp and left the texture raised. I applied gold mica powders on gold clay and antiqued it with this pretty aqua color after curing. I added a simple gold snake along the bottom as an additional design element. I originally thought I would add some dangly beads or chain from this bar, but couldn't find anything I was happy with and ended up adding this textured metal tube and beads. And of course, I love to add buttons to a lot of my work as the focal point. I had picked the colors for this pendant to go with this beautiful yarn, and it turned out to be a great match. Here are two folded beads working together as a pendant. I used a square cutter and no openings were left open. It is totally enclosed. After curing, I used a hand drill to create some cording holes. In this case, I stamped on the surface of the clay but did not indent the pattern. Both the VersaFine Archival Instant Dry Pigment Ink and Memories Dye ink pad work well on polymer clay. I used my roundabout stamp for the pattern. With this type of design, the angle of the cording holes is very important, or you could have your components overlapping each other. Experiment with some prototypes first. Here are another few examples of the fully enclosed multi-component pendant idea. Instructions for these custom textures can be found in my Radiating Lines tutorial. Here are several examples from the old 2006 Step-by-Step Beads project. I'm using my fractured patterning surface technique here. This project can still be purchased at interweavestore.com. Just do a search for my name to find the Fold and Cut project. I love the shape of these two examples made with the end of a pod-shaped cutter. I've used my conga line and fandango stamps for the patterns. Both of these are fully enclosed and therefore need a way to connect the piece to its cording. For one, I've drilled holes for jump rings and a chain, and the other I've used rubber cording for a creative solution. These are all examples of my older work using folded beads. Remember to not limit yourself to just beads or pendants. I have an idea for using this technique for a bracelet. I would love to see what you come up with. This video is copyrighted, which means you are strictly prohibited from selling or distributing this video. However, you are free to sell work based on this folded bead technique as well as the patterned surface technique I have demonstrated here. Acknowledgement that your work was inspired by the techniques shown here is always appreciated. Enjoy!